So you've heard the perspective on water. We're now going to move to energy, which is a consumer body that's evolved over time. It was Energy Watch, then it went into Consumer Focus. It's now Citizens Advice. And to speak about energy is Stu Horne. Welcome for Stu, please.
Okay, great. So thanks everybody. I'm Stu Horne. I'm Principal Policy Manager at Citizens Advice. I'm part of the energy team, and in particular I pick up our work on energy networks, systems, industry codes. It's really everything involving the pipes and wires that get to your house before you actually buy anything. I want to cover the role that Citizens Advice has in energy, but also its wider role in consumer advocacy. What we do in particularly on our energy work, how we do it, and what kind of impact we have, and also some of the strengths that we have, both as a statutory consumer voice outside the regulator, but also within Citizens Advice itself as a network. So just to cover off the background of how we got to where we are, we have a statutory role, which, and previously we were Energy Watch, National Consumer Council, Consumer Futures, I forgot one, four different Consumer Focus, and also Postwatch as well. So yeah, on the energy side, 4 different organisations arrived in Citizens Advice. That's our statutory role, and that covers energy, but we also have the statutory role covering Post, and also a cross-cutting consumer role as well. As Citizens Advice, we have a wider policy role looking at all sorts of consumer issues, so debt, family affairs, welfare. We also have a network of Citizens Advice bureaus on the ground that give us really amazing real-time information about what's going on in people's lives and the sorts of things that really matter, and in particular what matters to vulnerable consumers. I won't dwell too long on how the statutory role came in to Citizens Advice, but it came in relatively recently. In terms of what we do in energy, our role is split between advocacy, consumer education, and really hands-on help for consumers through the helpline and the extra help unit, which helps consumers with the most difficult energy issues, of which unfortunately there are far too many. In terms of the types of work that we do, I'm going to turn to that in a moment, but we're split between our work on the retail market, so that's kind of the here and now, smart metering, which is how the market's going to be transformed in the future, and all the negotiations and regulations that happen in the background, and the infrastructure of the system itself. And that's both in England and Wales. In Scotland, Citizens Advice Scotland, who are a separate organisation, represent consumers there, but there is some work that we do together, and the extra help unit's a really good example of that. The types of work that we do on energy, I'm not going to touch on this in detail, but it just kind of shows the breadth of what we do. So trying to improve customer service, representing consumers in the negotiations and policy development that happens in government and in regulators, providing a critical challenge to the issues that are emerging on smart meter rollout, helping consumers to make informed choices, and everybody has an opinion on how that can happen in energy, but we're giving a consumer's perspective on what's going on there, and also helping consumers in cold homes and trying to improve issues around energy efficiency. Now, how do we do that? Well, there's, I guess, an element of work that we do in the here and now, and that's our work that we do that affects the immediate situation, and our work that we do that's looking towards the future, so trying to anticipate issues that are going to be important later on that affect future consumers. That's both in the structure of the market, but also decisions about investment and infrastructure. So if you think about the types of way that we work at negotiating behind the scenes, using our expertise, using our intelligence, and all the breadth and depth of information we have from the service to influence government, to influence regulators, parliament, and politicians, and also, although perhaps not so much in future, influencing in Europe. We publish a lot of data, and a really good example of the sorts of data we publish and the impact it has are our complaints league tables, which enable people to see which companies are particularly poor at any particular point in responding to consumer complaints. And there have been some really big examples of that, notably N-Power over the last couple of years. But the situation's always a bit movable. We represent consumers in technical regulations. These are really important. These are the things that determine a lot of the investment and the huge amounts of money that's spent in the background. These really matter because although consumers don't see this in their bill, it's sort of implicit, it's worked into the cost that they face. It's huge amounts of money. It's up to a quarter of the amount of the bill that they pay. And often Citizens Advice is the only consumer group in the room. Not that other consumer groups don't want to get involved, but we have the expertise and we have the resource to be there. And our influence is important in making sure consumers' voice is heard. We have a role in educating consumers. One of the things we're looking to develop at the moment is a star rating system for suppliers. So a very simple metric to help consumers make choices when they're buying electricity or gas. And we're involved in creating digital tools. So for example, and we're trying to move away from the traditional flat digital tools into dynamic tactical tools. We're creating a tool that helps consumers sign up to energy suppliers and networks priority services registers. At the moment, as a consumer, you have to go and approach each network and supplier individually, and we're looking to develop a tool that allows you to do it all in one go. Also, an element of what we do looking forward, we have a really key role in challenging current thinking. So we're not afraid of saying what we think, as long as we think it's right, we've got the evidence base and it's impactful. In particular, we have a focus on making sure that criticising policy and thinking where it doesn't fit in line with the way that consumers think or behave. And I think we're going to hear a lot later about behavioural economics. This is a really key plank about making sure that things actually work with the way that consumers actually act and not the way that we think they're going to act. And we play a role in supporting wider public debate. So I think a really good example of that is where we've campaigned for a long time on prepayment meters and worked really closely with Energy UK on developing. Energy UK just recently published a set of principles for suppliers for prepayment meter customers. So this is a really big development. It's really fantastic. Energy UK have done that. And thank in part to our campaign that we've been running for quite a long time. So in terms of our strengths, first of all, I wanted to think about what the strengths are of our organisation from a statutory point of view. What do we deliver in our statutory role? Well, we're independent and we're trusted. Our independence, our recognition metrics are amazing. I should have said right from the start, I've just joined Citizens Advice from Ofgem, the energy regulator, so I like to think I've got a rounder perspective on these things. But still, the stretch and the reach of Citizens Advice really is quite incredible. And I think, or at least I know, that we have a 97% recognition rate with consumers, which is incredible. We also have a really highly trusted role with the media. And this enables us to really have an impact when we've got an issue that we want to raise and we want to put it out there and seek response to it. We're able to do so. And to give you a really good example, we recently published some critique of Ofgem's midpoint review on the gas transmission price control. This is a really nerdy corner of energy regulation. And really there isn't a lot of interest in it, except that National Grid just tried to get £86 million worth of bill payers' money back for a pipeline that they weren't going to build. And Ofgem quite rightly said, no, National Grid, we don't think you should have the money. And we supported Ofgem and that said that's great. But there's lots of other things that are in that price control and millions of pounds of consumers' money that is going to go out and outrun that should be looked at and clawed back. And the Telegraph picked this up and ran with it. And it's a fantastic example of how you can take a really tiny corner of energy regulation and make it work. We have full-time staff. They've got huge amounts of expertise. We're not afraid to challenge industry, government and regulators where it's right to do so. We carry out a lot of research directly with consumers. This is both immediate and longitudinal, looking at things in the future. And also, we try to build a lot of links between the different sorts of work that we do. So not just in energy, but also across debt transport, telecoms. So 2 really good examples of this. We have been looking at the way that debt is treated in different sectors. So 2 of the worst offenders in debt are the government, and local government in particular, but also telecom companies. And we've really shone a light on that and tried to change practice. Also in telecoms, we've been looking at the way that consumer advisors can get access directly to companies in the same way that they can in energy. So building a link there between good practice that happens in energy and transferring that into another sector. I'm over time, but can I just go for another 30 seconds? What I wanted also to talk about is what's the strength of being outside the regulator, but in an organisation like Citizens Advice. So like I said, our reach is huge. 4 in 10 people in Great Britain have used Citizens Advice, the Citizens Advice service, which is massive. 100 people an hour use our web service, which is just incredible. And 1 million people looked at our energy advice pages last year. We have a huge, rich amount of data, which we use to build an evidence base to go and influence those who are decision makers in government. We really understand the issues that face vulnerable consumers. So, I mean, 40% of their contacts with us about energy are just about billing, which sounds like a little thing, but it's really important to those consumers. 62,000 vulnerable consumers contacted us because they didn't know who their energy supplier was and they needed our help to find out, which for me is just a stunning stat. And the stakes are really high because those consumers face really high costs and disconnection after that, if it doesn't go right. And lastly, we help people on the ground. And a lot of people at that. Sorry, Roger.